All right, so I am joined here with my lovely wife, Zaritza,
Hi.
and I thought I would do something a little different this time. Normally, I'm just like looking at the camera and monologuing, and I thought that would be a little weird for this project. And so basically, I've been embarking on this new year-long project, and Zaritza even had the idea of, well, maybe we could have a little conversation and record it, and that might be more interesting to listen to maybe than me just scripting something and reading it out at the camera. So let's see
Well,
how it goes,
because we have these conversations all the time,
Yeah, yeah.
and I get to see this sort of casual sort of
Informal Scott.
informal
Yeah.
Scott going through the thought process and going through the experience as
Yeah.
well with you. And then I just thought it would be so nice to sit down and talk about it.
I think we were sitting on like the couch in our house and
Yeah.
and I was like going on probably manically about like some books I was reading and you're like this is what we should be recording. So
It's true.
let's see.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
You're working on a new 12-month project.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the third time you're doing this
Yeah.
because you did the MIT challenge years ago, and
Yeah.
then you did the year without English, and now you're doing a new.
Well, this one's very
1 year.
different, though,
It is.
you know? Yeah.
It is very
Yeah.
different. I was gonna ask that.
Yeah.
But maybe let's go over the project and kind of how you came up
Yeah.
with it, and then we can talk about it. in
Yeah.
details.
So this idea for this project I think kind of came about because I'm recognizing I'm at a different stage in my life, I think. You know, when I did some of those early projects, I was like right out of college, and it was sort of a moment in time where, you know, responsibilities were low, opportunities were high, and I wanted to do some things that were going to be interesting and adventurous. And now I have a full-time business, we have a family, we have
Right.
2 kids, I have responsibilities, but I still care about like growth. I still care about learning. I still care about doing these things. And so I think, you know, to be honest, there was a period of time where I was, I don't want to say soul searching, but like trying to see like how could I apply that kind of mindset that had taken me through some of those earlier projects to this phase of my life where I'm not like trying to learn a new career skill or a degree or, you know, languages where, you know, I'm not traveling nearly as much now, so
Right.
I don't have the same opportunity to use them. And so the idea kind of, I don't know where the idea for this specific project came about, but I liked the idea of, I remembered when I was, you know, maybe I was sort of in my teens, I went through this period of a couple years where I made a lot of different changes in a row. So like I read lots of different books and I started exercising and I changed my diet and I read more books and, you know, I started waking up earlier and I went through a lot of these changes, but it was in that context of being, you know, like an 18-year-old.
Everything was kind of about you, and you had
Yes. Yeah.
all your free time to just dedicate to that. Whereas now, for a family,
Yeah.
you kind of have to prioritize different things. I ran into a friend the other day, and he was talking about how he wasn't exercising as much because he's
Yeah.
like, well, do I exercise or do I play with my son?
Yeah.
It's hard to make a choice sometimes. So how do you prioritize things as a parent, as a working individual, right?
Yeah.
Finding that balance.
But in some ways, it's more important because I
Yes.
feel like, you know, like just to use, well, considering we're going to be talking about the first month here of fitness, a little spoiler alert there, but just going to the gym, for instance, my
Yeah.
plan, like for most of my 20s was just, I went to the gym when it was most comfortable for me to work out, which usually was like late afternoons.
Yeah.
So
Like
like
4
in
p.m.
university, my classes are all done. Okay, it's like 4 p.m. I'm going to go
Yeah.
to the gym. I work for myself. I don't work in an office. It's a luxury, I know, but it would be the same way. You know, okay, I'm done all my writing for today. I'm going to work out. And then maybe when I'm done, I'll do some emails or some light work or something after. But it wasn't, you know, it wasn't trying to fit it in. It was just like, when is the best, most desirable time for me to go to the gym? And now, you know, when it's between work and having a lot more work commitments and, you know, calls and meetings, I have a team, there's a lot more in the business, but then there's a lot more at home. So, you know, outside of like when the kids are asleep, someone always has to be
Yeah.
with them and this kind of thing. And so in some ways the foundations, they're more important,
They
right?
are.
Because they don't happen automatically. They're not easy. It's very easy to tell yourself, oh, you know, I'm just a busy person, and so I don't have time for X, Y, or Z. And you pay the price for it regardless, even if that is a valid excuse. You pay the price for it down the road. So I think that was also part of the motivation for this project, of like kind of wanting to revisit that moment in my life where I kind of initially got enthused about doing a lot of these changes, but in the context of, I know a lot of this stuff already, but how do I make it work in my current life? The idea was to focus on foundations. So foundations are the sort of universal aspects of things that we need to do just because we're human beings. So these are things that are better for us, not, because we're accountants or because we like mountain climbing, but just because we're people. So, fitness, the one that was the first month that we'll be talking about, is like very clearly that kind of foundation. Most people don't exercise enough according to like the recommended guidelines, and it's clearly associated with better health. It's associated with increased energy, lifespan, all these good things.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things that we kind of have to be deliberate about. It's not like breathing or, getting enough food to eat that just sort of, for most of us, most of the time, we don't have to worry about it. And so the idea is that there are a lot of these foundations. Fitness is one of them. Another one could be productivity, having a productivity system. We live these sort of informationally complicated lives. A lot of us who are knowledge workers, you have appointments and tasks and errands and projects and all sorts of things that like you never would have had to worry about on the savannah. And as a result, we're not kind of naturally endowed with the ability to do this correctly. Like you need to create systems that work for you. And another example could be money. Being able to take care of your finances is important. And, for the most of human history, there was no such thing as money. So there's no concept in our brain of like compound interest, and certainly not things like investing or retirement accounts and things like that. And so these are all areas that are important. And they're things that are fairly universal. And I wanted to spend a year going through these foundations for myself. And some of them were already fairly strong. So I don't want to say that, my life was a disaster or anything, but some of them were fairly strong. But I think it's sometimes beneficial to, even if something seems to be working, to spend a chunk of time really focusing on it. Because often you find out, oh, well, actually, I wasn't doing this right, or actually this wasn't as good as I thought. And it's sort of like, you don't really pay attention to it because it's in your periphery. But when you start actually opening it up and looking at it, that's when you realize, oh, I can improve this or improve that. And so the idea is to do 12 months, and each month would have a different foundation, a different focus. So the first month, the one that I just recently finished, was fitness. And in particular, my goal for the month was to set up a new exercise habit of exercising for at least 30 minutes every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
And you did it every day.
I did.
For a month. And you're still doing it.
Yes,
actually.
of course.
The month is done.
Yeah. Well, if I just did it.
waking up.
Yeah. If I just did it for the month and then I stopped, that wouldn't be very successful, would it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since I've known you, you've never woken up at like 6 a.m. to exercise. I feel like this was sort of the first time that you decided that was the best time in the day to do it. It was kind of my suggestion, actually.
It was.
I take credit for that.
She's very wise. No, I think, so I had in the past tried these, like, I think in university for like a couple months, I was like waking up at 6 a.m. to go running.
Right.
There were a few times where I tried it. And again, it was sort of like being a 20-something person who didn't have a lot of like commitments and responsibilities. The sort of solution to the habit of exercise was always like, well, how do I make this best for me? And that was usually, again, to work out, 3 to 4 times per week in the sort of late afternoon. That was sort of I was most interested in working out. My work productivity would be going down a little bit. So it's a good time to exercise and pick yourself up again. And that was originally my plan when we moved. So a couple years ago, we were living in an apartment building. We had a gym in the building, and I would just go there when I wanted to work out. Yeah. And then we moved into a house, and I decided, well, I will get a pass to the local YMCA, which is really close to my office. And I would bring my gym close to the office. And then sort of like near the end of the day, I would go to the gym instead of just going straight home. And good idea. It sounds like it would work. And I did go, not 0 times. I did go regularly. But the problem was that very frequently I would have meetings that would run late. So I'd have,
Yeah.
you know, I've got a call with so-and-so and it's at 4 p.m. and then that's okay. I can't go to the gym now. Or, you know, there would be things at home. It would be a little
Yeah.
bit hectic. You'd be, you know, okay, can you pick this up for dinner? This kind of thing. And so, you know, it would be the kind of thing that like, yeah, it's nice when it works, but about like half the time it wouldn't work. And I wasn't going as consistently as I would like.
Yeah. One thing I was wondering about though, while
Yeah.
you were talking about that is, so you did this month.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of comparing it to your history of exercise and even fitness, doing sports, things like that, how does it compare? What was your past with
Right.
exercise?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have not been like the most athletic person in the world. I'm definitely like stereotypical kind of person who reads a lot of books and is not, you know, playing a lot of organized sports. Definitely not as a kid. Like I swam when I was in like middle school and a little bit of high school, but I was not fast. Like I never made any good times. And I think I ran a little bit on track when I was in high school. Again, I was not fast. I never made any good times. And so I think you kind of develop this identity around yourself where you're like, well, I'm not particularly athletic. Now, when I was a teenager, I don't know how I got into this, but I started going to the gym and lifting weights. Now, I've never been like a big guy, but I really liked lifting weights. Something about it just being, I liked the progressive aspect of it. Like if you keep going, you get stronger. It had this sort of, I don't know. It's hard for me to describe what I liked about it, but I really liked it. And so for most of my teens and 20s, that was my main exercise, is that I would go to the gym and mostly lift weights. And I think that's good. I think lifting weights is good. But I think one thing that was missing from that is that I didn't have that much focus on cardio. And that's something that I learned in this month, that the cardiovascular stuff, the stuff that gets your heart rate pumping, is some of the most well-studied for health benefits. And now that I'm like, you know, in my 30s and not so like obsessed about being really buff, you know, being healthier and being fitter is important. So that was something I wanted to work on in this month as well, is like having a balance, having it be, you know, enough cardio and also some weights, and not have it just be one thing or the other.
And that's interesting that you're saying that too, because nowadays you go on social media and you see all these kind of different opinions that people are posting, these short clips of like, weights are great for you, do weights, or cardio is good for you. So what is the balance? What do you think is sort of the optimal exercise for one person, or does it really depend on the person? Is it best to just go for something that is really interests you, or is there like I don't know, a combination of things that you should be focusing on?
I mean, I'm not the world's expert here, and I feel like my philosophy, not only with this month, but approaching the project in general, is really to defer to what expert opinion is. And it's not always easy to know what actual expert opinion is, because again, you go on social media and you have like all these fitness influencers or investment influencers who say things that, you know, sometimes they're like actually really bad advice.
Right.
And so for me, my first starting point was like, well, let's get some textbooks on this. So I actually bought two different textbooks, one from the American College of Sports Medicine. Maybe it's sitting up here, or maybe I took it down off the shelf, but it's the American College of Sports Medicine, and it has the Complete Guide to Fitness and Health. And so they were the ones that were really suggesting this 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous cardiovascular exercise, and at least
per day.
Per week.
Per week. Sorry.
Week,
okay,
yes.
I'm like, wait.
No. This is like the standard kind of recommendation. So if you look around and you say like, what's the recommended amount of exercise, you'll get this number, because it comes from this kind of like, experts aggregate all this data and then just sort of got together and decided this is what they were going to recommend to people.
Okay.
So that amount of cardio, and then at least two strength training sessions per week. And the difference is that strength and cardio seem to have different benefits for the body. So the cardiovascular system is really important for a lot of health outcomes, because, you know, obviously heart disease is like the #1 killer. And if you exercise, it reduces incidence of heart disease. I mean, like one of the most famous studies of this was Jeremy Morris. He was this Scottish epidemiologist, and he found that the people who worked for the London public transit system, the people who were in the double-decker bus system, the people who were driving the bus had about twice the rate of heart attacks as the people who collected tickets. And so they had to go up and down the stairs all day doing it.
Oh, wow.
And similarly, the postal workers who delivered the mail had about half the rate of heart attack compared to the people who worked in the main office. So these are like almost the same people, different amount of exercise, in particular this cardiovascular exercise, and it makes a big difference in health. And so I think cardio is probably one of the most well-studied. And there's also benefits beyond just heart disease. There's things like they now think that it's probably helpful for things like Alzheimer's and cognitive decline because, of course, the brain is supplied by blood, and so they think that Alzheimer's and some of these diseases are at least in part caused by sort of poor circulatory system to the brain, resulting in it making it harder for you to like clear out waste products and supply the brain and obviously stroke and all these kinds of things. So a lot of these are really related to the cardiovascular system, and that seems to be very important. Resistance training, on the other hand, has like a whole totally different set of benefits. So it improves your muscles, it makes you stronger, which is obviously very important because as you get older, sarcopenia, this sort of reduction in your muscle mass and your muscular strength becomes a problem. It becomes something where your 70s or 80s and you're much more frail than you used to be, and you can't do the things you used to be, and that's this loss of muscle mass, especially if you are not engaging in some kind of training that is forcing your body to maintain it. And it also improves your bone strength.
Right.
So actually,
especially for women, right?
The kind of irony is that like strength training and lifting weights is often associated with men, but because of the drop of estrogen after menopause, women are much more likely to suffer from osteoporosis. And it's basically just a hormonal thing. Your body is like encouraging bone degradation faster than bone growth. But if you do resistance training or impact cardio like jogging, it puts minor strain on your bones, and that actually encourages the osteoblasts to create new bone growth, or at least to sustain it so that you're not like having as much decline. So it's not as if okay, which is better, resistance training or cardio? It seems like they're both good, and they're good for almost sort of different non-mutually exclusive reasons. And so I think it's probably something where it is better to do both in your sort of overall fitness portfolio.
Okay. So what is your weekly routine like now with exercise?
So as you know, I've been like waking up between about like 5:40 and like 5:50 in the morning, and then I try to get out of the house by 6. It's warm right now, so I've been running outside for a lot of the cardio days. But some days I go to the gym and I don't have this sort of rule that it has to be running. So, especially if, as I've been kind of not running at all and then starting running, it can be harder on your joints and on your calf muscles and stuff. So like, I don't have any problem with like going and using the rowing machine or doing something like that. And, so I've been doing that. So 2 days of cardio, and then I'll do a weights day where, and I've been rotating through the kind of push, pull, legs sort of rotation. And I mean, it's still pretty early. I know I've been doing it for a month, so it will be really interesting to see like after a year, both like how has this habit held up, maybe what I've changed. But of course, also in terms of results, like I think it's very easy to get like interested in something and do it for a short period of time and then be like, yeah, I did it. But really what matters is, am I able to kind of bend the curve of the trend line of like, okay, a year from now, I feel like I'm on a different level for where I am with my fitness foundation.
Well, from what I know about you, from all these years of kind of us knowing each other and being married, I feel like you're one of those people that has a lot of discipline. So I feel like once you put your mind on something, I think you're willing to stick to it.
Yeah.
And especially with this project, I think it's really interesting because I know how many books you've also been reading about it. So that knowledge, I think, does give you a good foundation to kind of keep going and keep improving yourself and figuring out what you like, what you're good at. So I think that's really good. I think that's very interesting. And I'm going to do it as well. Why are you laughing?
No, nothing. You're laughing.
I really want to try doing it every day. Yeah. Like you did. And I am working out.
You can't go at 6 because we've got the kids at home right now. So now we got to figure out something different.
Somebody has to stay at home. And what I find hard for me, and maybe you'll have a advice or a suggestion, is that when I go to the gym, I like to do really hard classes, like either a HIIT class or strength training. That's what I like to do. I don't have a personal trainer, but I feel like this is kind of like having a personal trainer. You get to be in a class and there's an instructor there, and I like that, the motivation that it gives me being around other people. So usually when I do like an hour of that type of class, I'm pretty tired the next day.
Yeah.
And so how do I stick to like this kind of everyday routine? Do I just do like a light jog? Do I just like, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't think, first of all, it's not like exercising daily is like the rule. Like that, you know, I read books and they're saying if you don't exercise daily, you're doing it wrong. Like it is very much the case that you can exercise 3 or 4 times a week and be healthy. And for some people, maybe that makes more sense. They have more time. Now, the reason that I am kind of an advocate of doing things daily, and this isn't just coming from my experience now, but when I started getting into fitness, 20 years ago, it was the daily habit that really actually worked for me in the beginning. And I think the reason why is that so often when we are going to the gym, there's this sort of like little mental game we play with ourselves of like, well, should I go today? Yeah. And you're not trying to go every day. You're only trying to go 3 or 4 times a week. So if you still have a lot of the week left and you're feeling tired, you don't feel motivated, and you're like, should I go today? It's very easy to tell yourself, you know what, I'll go tomorrow. Right. But then you're actually saying that maybe more frequently than you realize, and you're actually going to the gym only, twice or once a week, and you're not hitting your target. And that's kind of what was happening to me before I started doing this challenge.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I do the same thing.
I was only going to the gym when I was at the office, so automatically I was only going during the week. I wasn't going during the weekend.
Yeah.
And even then when I'm here, again, like sometimes it would be, again, I'm preempted by a meeting or family commitments, and it would be not possible for me to go in the late afternoon. But then other times, you're just tired. You're just, I just don't feel like it today. And so I'll go tomorrow. And then that ends up becoming the case that you're going a lot less than you'd realize. So I think the daily habit has this advantage of it reduces this decision-making process. You just, am I going today? Yes. And so I think the power here is that you want to make the daily thing you do a little easier, and you want it to have a good default. So if you like doing intense classes or you like doing some kind of more vigorous activity that's longer, I think it's sometimes good to have this like backup. Well, when I'm tired or I don't want to do anything, then I'll do, like you could go to your gym and not do a registered class, but just go to the gym and like go on the bike for like half an hour, and like don't push yourself crazy hard, but just do a little bit. And then that's just what you do every day. So if you are really tired, you can always have that as an option. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you always go to the gym every day. Or you could do a stretch, or you could do, there's lots of different things you could do. And so I think the motivation for the daily exercise is not so much, you have to do this for, for physical health. Because again, the recommendations, nowhere did it say that like daily exercise was somehow necessary or important, but that it can sometimes be helpful for this sort of habit building reason. Yeah, so you made a point about me being really self-disciplined, and that being the key to like doing something like this. And obviously, I think self-discipline is something that's important. And I don't know, maybe people can judge whether they think I'm self-disciplined or not. But I also think sometimes that can be a little bit of, I don't want to say an excuse, but a bit of a cover for the real reason. That often we sort of unwittingly design our behaviors or design our sort of plans of actions in ways that create lots of friction. And then when we fail at them, we don't actually stick to the thing that we had intended to do. We sort of blame ourselves for not having enough willpower to see it through. But the problem was really that we designed it badly in the first place. And so I've been, sort of obsessed with this idea of like, how do you design behaviors? How do you design learning plans? How do you design projects? Not just so that you can achieve a result, but so that it's something that you can execute with a minimal amount of friction. So we already talked a little bit about like why daily exercise can somewhat counterintuitively be easier than not exercising every day because of this sort of cue response relationship, this sort of like, do I exercise today? And if sometimes you say yes and sometimes you say no, you're setting yourself up for a situation that requires a lot of willpower because yes, in the beginning, it's going to require willpower regardless because it's always an unfamiliar situation. But what you ideally want is that like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months in, you just don't think about it. It's just part of your life. And I think if all of us reflect on what we do in our day-to-day lives, there's lots of things that, do require self-discipline that we just do all the time because we don't think about it. Like if you work in an office and you go 9 to 5 and you work all day, I mean, that requires a lot of self-discipline. It's very hard to do that at home and just sit down and like, okay, I'm going to work. But you do it in part because you've been conditioned to do it. You've been conditioned to like, well, it's Monday, I've got to go to work, And it's not just the threat of losing your job, but it's just this conditioning that makes it so that you don't think to yourself like, well, do I want to work today or do I want to go watch a movie? Well, if you work in a normal job, that's not an option, so you don't think about it. And so I think the problem with a lot of this foundational work, and fitness is a really good example, is that in trying to make things easier for ourselves, in trying to make things more flexible, give ourselves more kind of, options, we sometimes, not always, but we sometimes accidentally design things in a way that we make it harder. And so I remember when I was trying to get into fitness again, like 20 years ago, and the thing that was the breakthrough for me at that time in my life was, no, just exercise every single day. And the reason why is because if you're not used to going to exercise at all, if it's not part of your sort of habitual repertoire, then doing it every single day just removes that decision. Now, if you already exercise a lot and you want to do a different kind of training regime, maybe you have enough motivation and interest in fitness that you can maintain a more complicated exercise scheme. But it just requires you to attend to it more and to like pay attention to it more. Whereas a daily exercise routine, I mean, this morning I woke up and I didn't even think about it. It was like, okay, I guess I'm going out and exercising. It was not something that required a lot of self-discipline because of that habit.
Yeah. No, I understand. I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I still struggle a lot, especially when I haven't exercised for a while. I find that my muscles are sore the day after. Like I don't want to do it. My body hurts. And you were actually talking about that too, that like you were saying that you read something that just because you're feeling sore, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be exercising, right?
Well, so the exact idea was that, obviously, if you're really sore after exercise, it's probably best to do some other kind of exercise. Yeah, I mean, you can stretch, but like, if you're starting a new exercise routine, even if you don't push yourself extremely hard, your muscles are often sore just because you're not used to using them like that. And so that can be an obstacle to going from doing nothing to daily. And that's why, I really think it's important to be sort of intense in the sense that you're kind of going frequently, you're maintaining this habit, but not being intense with the actual workouts. So in some ways, like, don't push yourself when you're getting started. Like, do less than you think you're capable of doing in the beginning, because you avoid that like potential risk of injury, the potential risk of like, pushing yourself too hard, being like, okay, I'm so sore, I can't possibly work out. So I think that's generally a good strategy. The advice I was thinking about actually comes from Michael Matthews' book, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. And he talks about, in the context of lifting weights, the idea that, like if you're doing a day where you're working on your chest, for instance, and your chest is still sore from the last workout, can you work out? And his argument in that book was that actually the sort of main thing to look for is not, are your muscles sore, but are you less strong? So like if you're not able to lift nearly what you were able to lift before, then you probably are not ready to train again. But if you are sore, it may not be the case. If you can still lift them out, it may not be the case you're able to do that. And I don't know how that applies to cardio or running. I don't know enough about the research to say anything specific about that. But I found for myself that sometimes, you get out of bed and your like calves are really sore from running, but then you actually are fine going for a jog. Maybe don't go as hard as you go every day, but sometimes there can be that just because you haven't moved, or you're sort of starting from a stationary position and you start moving around, you're like, oh no, like I can't even possibly work out, when maybe you could do a light workout if you're But I mean, obviously, if you're experiencing sharp pain, some kind of joint injury, probably best to rest those kind of things. This is just delayed onset muscle soreness, not, a torn ligament or sprained
Yeah.
ankle or something.
So you were saying you've been reading a lot of books about this
Yeah.
topic. I was wondering, how do you choose the the books that you read?
Yeah.
And then the advice that's in there, does it ever contradict each other?
Well, fortunately for fitness, the advice is like pretty consonant. So it's not the case that you have just like wildly differing opinions about what you should be doing. I mean, there on like really like nitpicky issues, you can have people that disagree about like, there's some books that like will put a lot more emphasis on strength training, and then like ones that are much more about like cardio. And but these are like, minor little quibbles. They're not really like saying dramatically different stories about exercise or benefits of exercise. I don't think this is going to be the case when I'm dealing with like personal finance or nutrition. I think there's
That's
actually
exactly
going
what
to
I
be a
was
lot more
thinking.
issues of like, okay, getting to that base level of like what is the actual expert consensus, or what are the areas where we know a lot versus this is speculation. I think that is going to be more important.
Yeah.
But I mean, the starting point for me, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the conversation, was that I know I'm not a domain expert on fitness. And so it's really important that I seek out what is kind of the sort of expert consensus opinion, as opposed to like, here's my theory based on my personal beliefs and whatnot, and then
Yeah.
just throwing that out there. And so for me, I like to rely a lot on textbooks. So in particular, I read 2 textbooks this month. One was the American College of Sports Medicine's Complete Guide to Fitness and Health. And that is it's a little bit more focused on general overall fitness, how it relates to health. So I think it was very relevant for this challenge. And the other book I read was I think it was the American Conditioning Association. I'm forgetting the name of the organization.
Okay.
Strength Conditioning Association, and they have a sort of a textbook that's used for like people who want to become personal trainers. That's like a kind of a resource textbook, and that one I thought was interesting as well. It had a lot more detail on like exercise physiology, like the biochemistry, a lot of kind of nerdy stuff that I really appreciate, and then also there was a lot more detail on exercise and routines and things as it relates to research for like training for particular fitness goals. So like if you're trying to increase your aerobic conditioning or strength conditioning, or how high you can jump or these kind of things, there was a lot of research on that, which is not so relevant to my current goal of like just maintaining my physical conditioning for health purposes, but I still thought it was interesting, like background information. So that was sort of like the core of like where I depend on my advice. But I think it's also good when you're picking out resources to look for people who have a kind of a credible writing style, I guess you could say. I think we're often drawn to people that have, really broad, extreme claims. And I always like to try to pick authors who, not just have good credentials, but they write in a measured way where like you can tell they're not trying to overhype things. And so my favorite popular book of the month was Daniel Lieberman's Exercised. He's an evolutionary biologist, and he has done a lot of work on the evolution of the human body. He wrote a book called The Story of the Human Body, which is also sort of related to the same topic about kind of our entire evolutionary lineage and like how that relates to modern diseases. And this book, Exercised, is sort of, I thought, this like very comprehensive review of all the different types of exercise, all the different types of ways that we move our body, how that relates to, why exercise is important, and also why we often struggle to do it. So that was a really good resource too. But then a lot of the other books were just kind of more subtopics that I was just pursuing because I thought they were interesting.
Nice. So I think we went over the first month in a pretty good detail. I think I kind of wanted to talk about the course in general and
Sure.
just kind of close things off. Obviously, this course is about many different topics. Every month is going to be different than the other. So in general, I think a lot of your readers and listeners, they might be like, well, I'm really good at exercise, but maybe I'll need help with, finance or productivity or something else. Why do you think doing it like in step by step, like for 12 months would be beneficial for somebody that might is already hitting some of the goals, but is lacking sort of the motivation or the knowledge in some of the areas.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the expert recommendations for exercise, I mean, they're not surprising. Like exercising 150 minutes of, moderate cardiovascular exercise, lift weights twice a week. This is not, earth-shattering stuff. And it's clearly not the case that if you talk to someone who fitness is a problem for them in their life, that, why are you doing this? Is because they didn't know. They didn't know that they were supposed to do this.
Right.
It's clearly that we know what we're supposed to do, or at least approximately what we're supposed to do. We just don't always do it. And so I think the behavioral difficulty of a lot of these foundations is really central. That if you look at each of these foundations, the problem is very rarely, well, I just have no idea how to do that, but more, I don't have a good way of integrating that into my life. And I think it's the integration that also makes it challenging, because it's very easy to look at one of these things in a one-off. So it's very easy to look at some, again, a fitness influencer who their entire brand is about fitness. Everything is about exercising. They clearly prioritize physical fitness, and that's great. It's motivating. I find it motivating too. But then, what about all the other foundations? What about, spending time with your kids? And what about, having a business? And what about, maintaining your personal finances and all these other little components? And sometimes they can synergize, but sometimes they're in conflict. So clearly the decision of I'm waking up earlier to exercise, but that means I have to go to sleep a little bit earlier. And if I'm going to sleep a bit earlier, then that means that maybe there's less time to watch a movie or do something else. And so for me, I think the reason to integrate all these different foundations into one program is to really look at how it integrates. And so I'm sure that people who are taking the course and people who are thinking about taking the course, they can probably look through their foundations and they can be like, oh, I'm really strong at these ones are okay, and these ones are kind of weak. And they'll be sort of like, well, why do I have to do all of them, or this kind of thing? And of course, obviously, they don't have to do all of them. But I think there can be a benefit in going sequentially through all of them, including the ones that you do really well and the ones that you're not doing so well, because it allows you this chance to work on integration, to focus on how they overlap, how sometimes they conflict, and also how they can synergize, how you can do two things at once, or how you can, go to a workout class with a friend, and then it's also a way to work on that relationship while you're also working out, or how you can, make improvements in your diet that also improve your physical health, and, that improves your sleep, and these kinds of things. And so for me, I think the motivation to create this course and to work on this project was really from that time period about 20 years ago of noticing myself doing a lot of these changes in this short period of time and realizing how beneficial that had been for me, and wanting to revisit it now that I'm in a completely different phase of my life, now that I'm much better at doing research and I have worked on some of these learning skills so that I feel like I can quickly survey a new field and get some of the expert consensus in a relatively short period of time. And then also to try to integrate this for other people so that they can maybe have a similar experience, that it can have kind of a catalyzing effect, so that you're not just focusing on one thing and then you drop it and then focus on another thing, but that you are integrating it, trying to set it up so that it can be something that ideally is not just something you do once and then you're done. It's not like I've done this fitness habit. Okay, well, I'm not going to work out anymore, but how you can put all those building blocks of the foundation, as it were, in place so that they all support each other. And so that was the aim of this course. And I think it will be interesting to go forward, and because right now we've just worked on this one, 3-4 months where there are other ones. And so you're trying to maintain the ones that you'd started before, and you're able to see, maybe places where they rub against each other, and then you have to make accommodations. And I think that's part of the process that I'm really looking forward to in working on this project.
And I also think people get very focused on certain things. They're like, okay, well, I'm very into my nutrition.
Yeah.
I'm cooking all these healthy meals. I'm exercising, but there is certain things that they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And I think having this kind of guidance to kind of take accountability for all these different foundations, one after the other, can be very beneficial for everyone, really.
I mean, I think one of the things I've realized for myself is that we're used to thinking about, well, X isn't a problem in my life because it's not in a crisis mode.
Yes.
Like we're used to thinking, oh, well, I don't need to work on X because it's not a crisis. Like it's good enough. And sometimes it is. I'm not trying to say that, you need to improve everything all the time, but sometimes there actually are major problems. It's just you're ignoring them. You're just like, oh, actually, I am actually quite out of shape right now. Or actually, my personal finance system is a mess, or my productivity system is a mess. And I'm just sort of telling myself it's fine because, it's like, it's not causing a crisis situation. And so I think part of the idea of doing this is that spending a month on each foundation is a chance for me to like dive deep into the research. So really try to get a kind of focused picture of, well, what would the ideal look like? What is the sort of best approach for me in my current station life to try to implement some of these ideas? But also to just give myself the chance to pay attention to those things, because it's very easy. These foundations are in the background. We have our like family commitments in school and our career and like all these things that they're always pressing. They're always in the moment. They're always these, urgent activities, but they're not necessarily always the most important activities. And so focusing on each foundation is this sort of chance to spend a month and be like, well, is this okay? Or what should I be doing to make this better? And so I think I'm really looking forward to going through this project, because not just for the things that we're like, oh yeah, I know I need to do a bit better with that, but also to look at the things where I think I'm doing it pretty well, but actually maybe I could be doing it a lot better without a much additional cost to my life. And it's just, I've been just ignoring it,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up our conversation here, what is the biggest insight that you have just doing this 1 month challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always knew that exercising was important, but I think one of the benefits of reading all these books and getting kind of deeper into the research is that it really underscores how important it is. I think when you're talking about a lot of this self-improvement stuff, everyone has their like, oh, well, you need to be doing this. Like, well, you need to be meditating. Well, you need to be journaling. You need to be doing all these things. And I mean, yes, that's true. And I mean, we're doing a course where we're doing a lot of things. So I'm also part of that club that's advocating for things. But exercise in particular is one of those ones where not just the, extreme enthusiasts think that it's great, but if you look at the research, it's like an extremely strong effect size of like how much it improves your overall health, your chance of dying goes way down. It improves the chance that you're going to be living healthfully and not just not dying. It improves your ability to learn. It increases some of the brain-derived neurotrophic factors that affect neurogenesis in the brain. It improves your mood. People are now using it as a first-line treatment against depression. They can use it against anxiety. It has a lot of these powerful effects. And so reading all this research, it's kind of, when you immerse yourself in it, I think it really also not just changes a shift in your behavior, but it changes a shift in your attitude of like, no, this is something that's really important that always needs to be there, that it can't just be like, well, I'll do it when I have time. And so I think that was maybe the thing that was surprising for me, is not just that it's important and that it matters, but just how much it matters.
What I was really surprised about is that you are still willing to wake up at 6 a.m. every day.
You thought I was faking it, eh?
I really, because you're not the morning person.
No,
I
I'm
was
not
usually a morning person.
Yeah.
You were just kind of, I would be like,
I needed my 2 cups of coffee before I was
getting
like
the
fully
breakfast
on
ready, running around the house, getting the 2 kids organized, and you would just be in the corner, just like drinking your coffee and trying to
caffeinating myself awake. Yeah.
And now I'm usually up by the time we come back with both kids, and I'm getting them ready. But you are just, you come back home and you're so energetic, just ready for the day. And it's been really nice. And I like this for you.
Thank you.
I really do.
I mean, I think it was your suggestion initially to like switch from working out in the afternoons to the mornings. And I have to thank you for that too, because it wouldn't have been something that would have occurred to me, I guess also because I'm not like a morning person. I'm not like, I don't see myself as a 6 a.m. run kind of guy. I was always like, no, I need my coffee. I'm too tired. I can't do that. But now that I've been doing it for a month, not only does it feel normal, it feels natural, but it also feels like, yes, this is actually easier. And so I think that's, maybe if there's a big meta takeaway from this whole conversation, is that sometimes when you've been doing something for a while, what seems easier, the kind of balance of ease and difficulty can be very different from when you're contemplating a change. And so I think that's also the reason to kind of embark on these personal experiments for a period of time, because you often mispredict. You often think, oh, well, this is going to be the easy solution for me. And it turns out to be harder for like subtle, hard to describe reasons. And then you can also have situations where like, oh my, I could never do that. And then, I guess I'm waking up to run at 6 a.m. So, yeah.
Well, I think it has been really great. And I think it was really great that we get to have this conversation and talk about this. And I'm really excited for the following months, especially because I think a lot of it kind of involves both of us, like especially personal finance or even the nutrition, because we are family, we cook together, we eat together. So it will be nice to do this with you, and I'm really excited, and I'm looking forward to kind of the whole experience and seeing sort of how we look back on it a year later. And I think this is going to be really good. So,
wow. Thank you. And for everyone who's listening, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen through the project. And we'll be up together, either you or I or someone else. We will be kind of continuing the discussion when we go into the second month, which is going to be productivity, where the focus is on creating a full capture productivity system. And I'm really looking forward to diving into this one, because this is a foundation that I feel quite comfortable with, but it's also one where, a lot of the classic books, I haven't read them in 20 years, so it'd be nice to revisit them and focus on them in the new light of, being sort of in my mid-30s and having kids and thinking about these things a little bit differently. And that's really the goal of all of the foundations. And so I look forward to having those future conversations and sharing them with you.